Hi. So I want to preface this by saying that I'm not a psychologist, literally, in the slightest. And the title of this episode makes me sound like I am, and I'm not. So just heed my warning. Probably don't take my advice. Actually, I will just say now, I've been listening to some of my old podcasts back recently, and I've literally had to delete half of them because I'm like, you're actually spouting the purest was I've ever heard. So don't listen to me. I actually just make these for myself. If you like listening to me, you should probably go to the doctors. I'm just saying, I don't stand by anything I say. If you stand by anything I say, you're in the wrong. Just saying, that's my disclaimer for this video. Sometimes I agree with what I say. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I make good points, but then I feel like every year my philosophy changes. So just don't take what I say too literally, because I probably won't even stand by it a week later. So just to put that out there before I get into it. And that was a nice exact 1 minute disclaimer, which is really satisfying. So today I wanted to talk about the psychology of being mean and why people are mean, what the motives behind being mean are, where being mean comes from, how to stop being mean, blah, 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 blah. I've given all these fucking subcategories now, but I doubt I'm even going to talk about half these things. You know how it goes. So I feel like I'm specifically qualified to talk about this because I used to be so mean. I used to be a real mean girl. And it was one of those things where it wasn't even intentional. I didn't even realize that I was such a raging bitch. I think a big part of it had to do with the fact that I was literally just a teenager, and most teenage girls are horrible and they don't even mean to be. I think we're just not given the tools to understand our words or our actions and how they affect people. And I think especially growing up as an only child, there was never anyone to check me. There was never anyone to boot me down the stairs, So I was kind of just I kind of just did things as I pleased. And then when people were upset about it, I was oh, boo fucking who, which is a horrible mindset to have. But I have obviously been doing a lot of self-development over the last 4 or 5 years now, which is really strange to say because that seems like a really long time, but it feels like it's gone really quick. And a big thing that I feel has made me feel that I am qualified to talk about this is because a lot of the people that I had a lot of problems with, I'm now friends with again. A lot of people that I fell out with because I was probably being a bit of a raging bitch to them. We're now on very good terms again and very, very close again. So I feel that in my mind gives me some kind of validation that I have changed, because they wouldn't take me back as a friend if I hadn't changed, So I kind of want to talk about starting out with insecurities. And I know this sounds really oh yeah, she's talking about insecurities, boring, but it really, really is a primary cornerstone of where being mean comes from, because you've got all the basic things like projection and, just kind of harboring thoughts about yourself and trying to find ways to look for those same things in other people. Because it's funny, because as humans, we're constantly trying to assimilate, but we're also constantly trying to differentiate, which is very confusing for our brains. So I'm going to kind of break that down a little bit first. So as humans, we have an ego, right? This is nothing new. If you've listened to any 5 minutes of my podcast before, you've probably heard me talk about the ego. I'm really sorry, I need to cough. Okay, good. I'm not cutting that out, I'm sorry. So the ego is there to protect you. It is just basically, imagine it as a little piece of software. I imagine the body is like a computer, specifically the brain. And the ego to me is just a piece of software that is downloaded on the computer of your brain. And it is just there to help keep you safe. That's it. However, you don't do the virus checks on this piece of software ever unless you meditate and stuff. That's, to me, if you're going to put it into human computer terms, meditating is a virus scan for your ego software in your head. So when you don't do this, your ego picks up these little bugs, right? And these bugs come in the form of negative experiences. So say, for example, you get torn down about something. Someone says they don't like the shape of your teeth, or they think you have big teeth. That is a little bug, right, on your ego. And then your ego is kind of changed slightly after that. The way that your ego processes information is altered. I kind of see it as a filter over a lens. This is why I say quite often that people with... Sorry, I'm kind of like just getting over losing my voice. So I sound like a bit of a man, but that's okay. This is why I say that people that grew up in abusive households will always search for abuse, because to them that is their normal coloured filter. Whereas, so like if you imagine your life through a red coloured lens and that's all you've ever known, a green flag isn't going to look green to you, it's going to look like brown. But then, like, you know, think of it in like colour theory sense. Like, something that should be good isn't going to be good because it doesn't feel familiar. So that's why secure attachments are actually really hard to obtain unless you do all this work, because you literally have to like clean your own fucking filter and like clean your own ego, which is really difficult. So yeah, we're constantly trying to like separate ourselves from other people because the ego just wants to be on its own, and the ego wants to just do its thing and be the best and win, and, you know, that comes with separation. So I feel like a lot of meanness comes from separation. You know, I'm not like you. That's where like racism and discrimination and like I can never be like you. You're in a different class to me. You're in a different racial group to me. Like, you're a different gender. Like, that separation ideology of we're not the same because either visibly or, you know, mentally you have something that we don't connect there. And I feel like as children, this is the easiest way, and teenagers actually, this is the easiest way for us to be mean, pointing out other people's differences. And especially if, like I was saying earlier, someone's commented on your teeth, this kind of actually links into assimilation, but like they're kind of similar, but you kind of need to understand both separately first. I feel like I've kind of conflated the two there, but yeah, so I feel like the older you get, the more you turn into assimilation mean as opposed to differentiation mean. Because when you're younger, you're like, why are you that colour? Or why do you have that thing? Or why are you autistic? Or why, like, it's like your brain doesn't like accepting change just because in our brains, like, historically, change poses a threat. And that's not a bad thing. Like, it's really, really not. However, this is what I'm saying about we need to keep ourselves in check. And especially if there's no one there to check you and you can kind of just like let these thoughts like run rampant, like that is really, really dangerous. So in terms of assimilation, it's funny because we assimilate through being mean quite a lot of the time. And I'm going to go back to the whole teeth thing that I was talking about, because I feel like I kind of started talking about it and then I stopped talking about it. But so we assimilate through our insecurities. I know a lot of English people listen to this, but I also know a lot of people from other parts of the world listen to my podcast, and I just want to explain a little bit on British back law here. So if you're English, you probably need to skip the next like 2 minutes or something, but if you're not, this will probably be really helpful for you. And it's probably the same in other countries, but I feel like the way that it's so dominant and prominent in England is, I don't know if that's like the same in other countries, but I know it's definitely an English thing that, one, we can't take compliments, and two, we're constantly trying to bond over our weaknesses. So a lot of the times people will bond over trauma in England, and I know that literally happens everywhere, but like it's a big thing in England to just like complain to each other. Like, it's like part of the culture, like, oh, it's such shit weather today, oh, I know, like, oh, I was meant to do this, and like that's how you get chatting to people, is just through complaining. And I don't know that it's like that in a lot of other countries, and if it is, I'm sorry that I'm not researched enough in that, but like it's such a big part of English culture to just fucking whinge all the time. And I think a big thing as well with English people is you're not meant to take compliments, like, or you're meant to be like, oh my god, no, you, haha, like it's seen as like rude or arrogant to just accept a compliment. And I feel like a lot of boys, right, I know a lot of girls relate to this, a lot of boys will be like, just take a compliment. Like, if I'm complimenting you, just take it. And it's like, I've literally been hardwired into you thinking that you are going to think I'm arrogant if I just take this compliment. Like, give me a break. Like, I am literally just behaving how I have been socialised to behave. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that. Is like, when I do something and you're like, oh, stop trying to be like coy, or stop trying to be like, you know, oh no, I'm not, no. It's like, I'm not doing that because I know that I'm hot, but like I don't want you to think that I know that I'm hot. And I feel like that's like a real distinguishable trait between our generation and older generations, is like, I do believe that we are the first generation that is like comfortable to be open and say, I think I'm attractive, or I think I'm smart, or I think I'm, you know, any good adjective Because before you couldn't really do that. Like, you weren't really, not you weren't allowed, but like you would definitely get a look if you were like, I think I'm so beautiful. People would be like, oh yeah, she loves herself. Whereas now, I'm so sorry. Whereas now I feel like that's changing like quite significantly, which is nice actually, except it just means a lot of really, really, really core hardwiring for us as people. Yeah, so I can't even remember if I spoke about the teeth thing or not, but I'm really trying to get through to this teeth point, and it's taking so long. So if someone says, like, if someone tells you as a child, you've got ugly teeth, you're going to kind of constantly look for people that, even it might even be subconscious, but you're going to look for people that have ugly teeth because you want to feel less alone. So that's the whole assimilation point of it, is, you know, we're trying to make ourselves feel less alone about the differences we have. However, the issue being with this is that you're probably quite often going to project what you've experienced, because, you know, they say the abused becomes the abuser. And I'm not saying someone's telling you have bad teeth is abusing you, but I'm saying, like, in terms of mean behavior, that is quite often what we do. Like, if someone, I'm trying to think of an example that I've done before, and I can't really think of one off the top of my head, because there was so many, because I used to be like a little bitch. But I feel like quite often, you know, someone will have an insecurity about something, and they'll just constantly project it onto other people because they're trying to find someone to assimilate to, but it's through the worst possible way. It's like, you know, instead of connecting over this thing, it's like, well, yours is worse than mine. And you know that a lot of people say, like, oh, they're just jealous. Like, I grew up in a household where my mum was literally like, they're just jealous of you. I was like, yeah, I know. But like, as a child, like, I was constantly like trying to find ways to bring myself up, and that came through putting other people down. And I'm comfortable talking about this now because I've done a lot of the work on like the guilt that has come along with this. Like, don't get me wrong, like, this isn't me coming on here and being like, I used to be such a bitch, boo fucking who. Like, I have spent a lot of time working on my treatment of others because I know it hasn't always been what I would want it to be. And I feel like it's important. I was going to say, like, as someone who has a platform, I don't believe that this is really a platform. Like, I like, this is just like my own thing. If you listen to it, you listen to it, you know, like, I'm not reaching the masses here. I'm no fucking Julia Fox, but knowing that like a small, like a young teenage girl might listen to this, I feel like it is important for me to come on here and say, I know I was the problem, heavily. And that does not mean that other people weren't the problem, because I can sit here and blame whoever. I could blame anyone I want, but you're never going to grow from something or heal from something or deal with something unless you take accountability for what part you had to play in it. Because it's all well and good understanding why you did what you did. Oh, I did this because this other person said this to me and it gave me this insecurity, therefore I tried to feed it into other people, blah, blah, blah. Great, that's great that you have that, you know, backlaw and you can understand that. But that still kind of misses that vital part of accountability. And I think accountability is one of the like crucial parts to healing, is being able to say, I was so mean and I wasn't very kind. And like, I apologize for those things, you know? And like, this isn't like a fucking public apology to like anyone that I've hurt, because all the people that I've hurt that, you know, I care about, that's been dealt with, you know? But I feel like it's really important, and it's also really, really hard to figure out your own shortcomings. And like, one of my biggest shortcomings was that I felt if someone was mean to me, I could just be just as mean back. Like, I was very much like, I'll treat you how you treat me. But then I felt like it kind of, you know, earlier, like I'm saying with this lens, like, you have this lens, you sometimes think people are coming for you when they're not. Just because people have come for you in the past, it doesn't mean other people are coming for you, you know? And I feel like that's a really, really important thing to realise, like, especially if you are a young girl and you're, you know, hormonal and you're defensive and you're going through like these insane bodily changes and mental changes and psychological and physiological changes. Give yourself a bit of fucking grace. Like, you're allowed to be stressed, you're allowed to be angry, like you're allowed to be all these things. I feel like when I was growing up, we weren't given that space to be allowed to be these things. There had to be a reason. So a lot of times we directed that reason at other girls, you know? Like, I grew up in prime pick-me vibe era. Like, I grew up in the era of, like, I'm not like other girls, and it wasn't even a joke. I grew up in the era of, like, I wear hoodies and skinny jeans. I'm not like other girls. I grew up in the era of Taylor Swift, I just want to be with you. Like, if you've seen the music video to that song, fuck me. Like, it is so bad. Like, I just grew up in the era of separation. I'm different. Other girls are wrong. I'm not like them. They're so this and they're so that. And like, all of us, like, literally all of my generation have had to fucking unlike, I don't know what the word is. Like, I feel like I've been brainwashed as a child and a teenager into this, you know, I'm so different and, like, I'm so, you know, these other girls are so stupid, or they only care about what, like, this thing. And, you know, that gave me license to project my insecurities onto these, you know, fucking girls that were trying their best. And I think this is the thing, is like, if you put hormones into it and you put all these other things into it, no wonder everyone's stressed, everyone's anxious, everyone's got a short temper. Like, it makes sense, but also we weren't given the tools to know how to deal with it. It was just like, oh yeah, well, she did this and she did this and that's why I feel this way. It's like, no, you feel this way because your fucking cortisol is through the roof. Like, we weren't allowed to just be experiencing emotions because we were experiencing them. Like, there had to be someone to blame. And I think that's a big thing that we've probably learned, like, as a generation now, is that, like, there's nothing to blame sometimes. Like, sometimes it's literally just, like, bodily autonomy, or, like, maybe not autonomy, anatomy. That's the better word for it. But, you know, we understand these things more now, and I don't know if people that are in that age bracket, like, I have a cousin, she's, like, 14, love of my life. I literally, I would lay down in a ditch for that girl so she could walk across me. But I don't know what their mindset is on things. I don't know the inner workings of her brain as much as I would like to. I don't know what her school system is like. I don't know what they're teaching her. And I just wish that they are teaching her that if you feel the need to be mean, you need to be able to communicate that. And I feel like we're just not taught to communicate. Like, the amount of times that I was so angry, I used to, like, hit people quite a lot. Like, no, I'm not, I'm sorry, so I shouldn't laugh, but, like, I used to get so frustrated as a child. Like, I think it's kind of like an undiagnosed neurodivergent thing. Like, I had all this energy and stress and, like, pent up emotion that I didn't know what to do with. So quite often I would just, like, lash out physically. Like, I think I can remember twice distinctly. Once I was, like, 6, and I think another time I was, like, 12, maybe 11, 12, where I hit 2 of my friends. And, like, I remember literally being like, as soon as I did it, I was like, oh, fuck, I shouldn't have done that. And it didn't end well. I got in trouble both times. Like, it's not a good thing to do. But, like, because I had no tools, and this is not an excuse, but I had no tools to be able to understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling. So I just lashed out. And I know we were talking about being mean in the sense of, like, verbal, you know, but this kind of thing does transcend, like, verbal, physical. Like, girls fight a lot. And I feel like a lot of it is just because they don't have any kind of tools to deal with the way that they're feeling. And quite often, anger, stress, you know, disagreements, they kind of always seem to get aimed, like, you know, in a direction that they probably shouldn't be. Like, half the time I look back on the reasons that I would lash out at people, and it had nothing to do with the person that actually got the brunt of the issue. I was just being a little bitch for no reason. Like, I was just, like, complaining to complain. And, like, you know, have you ever said something and you thought afterwards, like, well, that wasn't very nice, was it? Like, I didn't need to say that. But then afterwards, it's kind of like you don't really have the ability to swallow your pride and say, like, oh, like, I'm sorry, like, that wasn't fair. Like, oh, it was like this running, I don't know why, I'm laughing because I'm, like, shocked at how bad I used to be. And I'm also kind of telling you these stories that make me sound horrible to make you feel better about yourself, because I don't want to come on here and be like, I've never been mean in my life, because that's not true. But I feel like it's important to share these experiences, to you know, make you realize, like, it is, you can change. Like, I was so mean, and now I really pride myself on not being mean ever. Like, I try really, really hard to, like, be fair and logical and rational with my emotions. And I want people to know that that is so possible. Like, despite whatever upbringing you have had, it is so possible. And I kind of want to talk about, like, how I went from one to the other, because it's kind of been, like, a really, really long journey. Like, it's been, like, 4.5 years now. And I feel like it's necessary. Also, what works for me might not work for you. So just take that with a grain of salt, a pinch of salt, whatever. Take it with some salt. And just, you know, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Like, it's a TikTok tarot reading. So, first reason I decided that I needed to change was because I basically almost died. I think I've told this story before. I got in a really bad accident, almost died, woke up and was like, oh my God, I believe in, like, something other than us. And before that, I was a hard atheist. And I was like, no, it's just us, and then we die. Like, I was so anti anything. And some stuff started happening to me after I woke up from that accident. And I just had, like, you know, they say, like, a lot of, like, when people have near-death experiences, like, they find Christ or they find spirituality. Like, that was literally me. I found it all. And I kind of, like, make a joke that spirituality hit me over the head, because it literally did. Like, I like, it saved my life. Like, I don't know. I feel like I needed it at that point in my life. And I feel like it woke me up in a way that I felt like I'd been asleep my whole life. Like, I felt like I'd been on autopilot my whole life. Everything I'd ever done, it was just like I was just running on response. I wasn't listening, I wasn't hearing anyone. I was just living to respond and react to everything. And I felt like for the first time in my life, I was awake. And for the first week, this was great, because I was like, oh my God, like, I'm so aware of everything. Like, I felt like clear, and I'm so sorry. I felt like clarity for the first time in my life, which was great. And then I realized, what the fuck, I hate my friends. My friends hate me. We're not right for each other. I hate my job. My relationships with my family are fucking crumbling. Everything's going wrong. What the fuck do I do? Like, I'm not a good person. The people I'm around aren't good people. We're only situational friends. I don't have a real friend. What's going, like, literally, what the fuck am I doing? And this is really, really common for people that go through, like, spiritual awakenings. They have that whole, like, everything crumbles. Everything has to, like, fall apart to fall back together kind of thing. I know it sounds really, like, ooh, like, fucking cliche, but it's true. So I started falling out with my friends a lot. I feel like a big part of when you wake up to something is you start to see behaviours that you portray and your friends portray and other people portray, and you can't just, like, glaze over it anymore. So you start getting stressed, you start getting anxious, you start thinking, how can I talk to these people about things, especially if these people are either people that have been in your life for a really long time, or you've just never had that relationship where you can communicate. Like, either, you know, whatever it is, it's hard. There's a disconnect. So I had this disconnect with these people that I'd been friends with for a few years, and they were, like, my group, you know. So it just starts going terribly wrong. And at this point, I still haven't, like, taught myself any of these skills to be able to handle myself yet. I'm still very reactive. However, I have the awareness to know that I'm being reactive, if that makes sense. I remember one of the lower points in my classiness was when I shouted at one of my friends in a Pure Gym car park because she walked out the gym and left without saying hello to me. And that fucking triggered me, because I was at the time, I think I've spoken about this quite a few times on this podcast, but it's a really good example of being triggered. I was really jealous that my friend and another one of her friends that I'd introduced them together, they went to the gym together, and I felt like they had a better friendship than me and her, and I was jealous. And then when she left, I was like, how could you do this to me, you fucking bitch? And I was literally screaming at her at like 5 p.m. in the Pure Gym car park. Like, oh, yeah. So it's like one of those things where you kind of have to be aware that you're gonna make mistakes, and like you're gonna do things and you're gonna look back on it and be like, what the fuck was I thinking? Like, why did I do that? Why did I think that would be a good idea? So I think after that we kind of drifted apart, and fair enough. Like they were like, you're really manipulative, sorry, and calculated, and we don't like you. And I was like, well, you're all those things too. And they were like, and you're a liar. And I was like, no, I'm not, you're a liar. Even though I was a liar. Like it was one of those things where I was like people pleasing lying. And this is why I really don't like people pleasers, because I feel like people pleasers omit things or lie about things, or like kind of like glisten up the actual truth of something because they're worried that you're not going to like what you have, like the actual story, you know? And I don't not like people pleasers in the sense that I won't be friends with them, but like I'm wary because I was one. Again, this is me projecting. Like even now I can say I project, like I'm aware of it, you know, and I'm going to work on trying to stop it. But I do feel like, you know, people pleasers do have a tendency, like I've got some very, very close people pleasing friends, and even to this day, I'm like, you don't need to do that around me. But I understand it's got nothing to do with me, and it's hard for you to understand that. Like, I get it, but it's also really frustrating because being a people pleaser is literally the most time-consuming thing you will ever do in your life, because you're always trying to do things to make other people feel a certain way instead of just existing. Like, I remember when I broke up with my ex-boyfriend, one of the reasons was I was like, you need to just stop trying to please me. Like, I am happy. Like, it is not your job to make me happy. And he was like, but I'm your boyfriend. And I was like, so? Like, that's not your job. Like, your job is not to make me happy. It is my job to make me happy. It's your job to exist. And if I like you, I will stay with you. If I don't, we will break up. I don't dislike him. I just, like, you know, it just run its course. Like, and I feel like this is the thing, like, we should have people in our lives because we genuinely want them there, not because we're like, oh, you know, like, they did all these things for me, or it's situational or transactional. No, you should just enjoy their company. It doesn't matter if they're like the richest person in the world or the poorest person in the world, as long as you enjoy their company and you feel safe in their presence. Like, that's literally the only two qualities I look for, like, in a friend is, what can they offer me and how rich are they? No, I'm joking, but like, as long as like I feel comfortable in someone's presence and I enjoy the person that they are, that's it. Like, I'm not looking for them to please me or satisfy me or like bring me something, you know? And I feel like a lot of people have had relationships where they've had to, especially if you grew up with parents that kind of couldn't meet their own needs, like that's quite often how people pleasers are born. And like, speaking from being an ex-people pleaser, I grew up with a chronically ill parent. So I quite often, sorry, I just heard people like laughing outside my room. It was a bit scary. I quite often had to learn to self-soothe, and it raised me with a lot of like issues, to be honest. Love my mother dearly, love her so dearly, but it did raise me with issues because I kind of, a lot of the times had to like raise myself, and like I didn't know how to deal with things, so I just dealt with them the way that I could. Whereas if, you know, my mum wasn't as ill, she would have been able to help me more with it. But that's not her fault. That's not anyone's fault. It's just the way it was. But I have, you know, you kind of have to take responsibility for your own upbringing, even if it wasn't your fault. Because no one else is going to take responsibility for you, you know? So, you know, you kind of realise, okay, I'm with these people, I'm people pleasing them, they're people pleasing me. We don't actually like each other. It's situational. Okay, then you have to go through the fucking dreaded loneliness. Like, you do. Because unless you want to just stay in this situation that isn't serving you, which is just a cycle, and the thing we know about cycles is that unless you change them, they will just continue. And I literally got pushed to my limit. Like, I did not make the choice to leave these people. It just happened for me. Like, I'm a very big believer of, like, the universe, God, whoever, whatever you believe in, will turn up the heat and turn up the heat until you leave. Or they will leave you. It will leave you. Like, something will happen that is so bad that you will have no choice. Like, it will get to the point where, like, there is no choice. And for me, that was what happened. Like, it got to the point where there was no way that we could have stayed friends. And then, you know, you're on your own and you're like, fuck, what do I do now? I've got no friends. I need to seriously look at myself. Like, I have no friends. And then for me, it was a lot of, like, blame. Like, and they did this to me and they did that to me and I'm so alone. And, like, a lot of self-pity and self-doubt. And bear in mind, this happened when I was, like, 18, I think. So, like, pretty late in my teenage years. And I was still pretty mean. Like, you know, I was still a bit of a fucking bitch. And I was, like, blaming them. I was like, rah, 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 rah. And don't get me wrong, like, they weren't the greatest people in the world, but they weren't, like, hell incarnate. Like, they were just the same as me, I feel. Like, they were just kind of, you know, bratty, privileged girls, you know, that had kind of always been given what they want. And that is, like, quite the norm, you know? I don't think that's anything to scream and shout from the rooftops about. Like, I was like that. Pretty much every girl I went to school was like that. You know, give a few exceptions. But I feel like that is just the way it is. And kind of, as long as you can, like, now I can acknowledge that. But I feel like looking back, I was like, oh my God, like, they're so privileged. And fucking refusing to acknowledge my own privilege. Like, anyway, so this is, like, onto the part of kind of, that's, like, the whole point I was trying to make about, like, you actually need to just, like, leave now. If you realise, if a lot of those things, like, ring alarm bells for you, leave now, before it gets so bad that you kind of are forced to leave, or they will leave you. Like, one of those two will happen. Like, you will be separated from the thing that is, like, damaging to you if you're looking to grow. So, yeah, how did I change? Basically, being forced into isolation makes you change, because when all you're left with is yourself, and you don't have anyone to project onto, you kind of start experiencing how your behaviour affects others because you have no choice but to project it onto yourself, if that makes sense. Like, you don't have anyone to take it out on, so you start taking it out on yourself. And then you start to realise how not nice that is, you know? And it's even the little things, like the little comments that, oh, I swear, like, teenage girls are the queens of little comments. Like, just, you know, just enough, slight microaggression, just enough to really, really sting, but if you were to express it to someone else, they'd be like, well, that doesn't sound too bad. I don't know, I feel like that was such a thing in my school, but I went to a very, like, privileged, white, classist school. But yeah, no, I think it was a lot of meditation, a lot of shadow work, a lot of, like, just being honest with myself. And I honestly think that being forced into solitude allowed me to be honest with myself, because there was no one apart from me to judge me. Like, the only person that could be hard on me in that time was myself. Like, I didn't have anyone else really to go to and be like, look, I'm like, here's how I've been behaving or whatever. I kind of just had to, like, punish myself for it. And I think slowly over time I started, but bear in mind, I just want to, I want to say now, like, having, like, a personality change is a really, really gradual process, because cycles kind of come as they're ready to. So, you know, you'll have a cycle and it will take a while, because you have to kind of wait for yourself to be triggered. And when you're triggered by something, you can kind of, like, slowly figure out a different way to react. Like, it's one of those things where, like, you have to choose to react differently in order for the cycle to break. And it kind of changes the frequency that you're in. If you believe in frequency, like, that's the way I see it, is like, everything's just a projection of your mind. And that's why some people view, well, that's why everyone views the same stimuli completely different. So, you know, you kind of have to choose in that moment. And I think this was a really big thing that helped me, actually, and I hope this brings someone else comfort if anyone's still listening. At this point, an emotion only lasts in your body for 7 seconds, and it's your choice whether you choose to cling to it or not. And when I learned that, it changed everything for me, because quite often I realised that I was choosing to react to things just because, for something to do, because I was bored, because I was unstimulated, because, you know, I just felt that was what I should do. That was what my body knew to do. And when I kind of took that autonomy back and thought, I'm in control of my body, I'm in control of my emotions, like, I'm in charge, it like not only decentered the statement, regardless of whether it was hurtful or not. You're allowed to feel that emotion, feel it for the 7 seconds, really feel it for those 7 seconds, and then just let it pass, let it go. Like, don't cling to it if you don't want to. Like, if you want to, okay, work through it. You know, if it's a particularly hurtful and harmful emotion, it will be important for you to figure out why it has had such an impact on you. However, you know, if it's something that you think you can look past, please really try to, because I found that there has been so many things that I'm able to let go after that 7 seconds. And that has probably been one of the most beneficial things for me, is being able to let go, being able to say, like, you know, I choose not to react. That's probably one of the more powerful things that I've learned, is choosing nothing. You know, they say in business, you have two options. You can do something, you can do nothing. Nothing is always an option. And I don't mean that in the sense of enabling people in bad behaviour, because that is also something that I've done. I've enabled people to behave badly by doing nothing. But what I mean is, if you are at the point where you feel threatened or you feel angry, I know what anger feels like, and I know how hard it is to choose nothing when you're angry. But just try and choose nothing, because I promise you, if you wait out those 7 seconds and just think, this is literally just chemicals in my head, neurotransmitters sending a signal. Think about it. Just literally, like, if you want to be that weirdo that's like closing your eyes in public and just literally just think to yourself and just let it pass. And if it doesn't pass, go home if you can. Go somewhere that you can be on your own for a minute. Write down in your notes why you think you feel triggered by it. A really important thing to do is identify why. For me, this helps massively, because I felt I had so many unanswered questions in why I felt so triggered by things constantly. I was constantly triggered and I didn't know why. And having the why for me has been so beneficial in, you know, understanding like how to deal with things. Like, oh, I'm triggered by this because, you know, I lacked this growing up. Like, if someone's flaunting their wealth in front of me and it seems like, you know, a bit egregious, I am triggered by that because I didn't have that growing up. So I feel a sense of lack. I don't feel good enough. Not their fault. Not their fault. Not my fault. No one's fault. It's not a blaming thing. Like, I think a big thing for me is like right and wrong are so subjective. I don't really believe in right and wrong, because I think a big philosophy for me is that what is food for the spider is death for the ant. I don't fucking know what spiders eat, but like, you know, something that is necessary for one is detrimental to the other, and that is literally the cycle of life. And it's balance, and it's, you know, good and bad. You can't choose. It's not real. It's subjective depending on what side of the coin you sit on. And you can't control what's going to happen. You can only control what you do about it. And I wish someone had told me that as a 13-year-old girl who was so angry all the time and didn't know why, is that, you know, when you feel like people are coming for you, they're not. They're just doing what's best for them, or they're doing the best that they know how. And I feel like we need to really, and like I'm really aiming this towards young girls, because I feel like we really need to extend more grace to each other and ourselves, because it's like a really hard life that we live in. And I don't care what boomer comes on here and tells me, you have it so easy. No, we don't. Like, we don't. Fair enough, we don't live in the Middle Ages where there's beheadings every day. And fair enough, we have the privilege to be way more aware of our central nervous system, and we have so many luxuries that our elders and, you know, people in our families weren't afforded, and we should be so grateful for that. But we also have things that they didn't have that make things so hard. We're so aware of everything around us all the time. We shouldn't be aware of this many people. We shouldn't know that this many people exist. We shouldn't be able to compare ourselves to people that are on the other side of the world that live a completely different existence to us. That is not a fair comparison. Like, you know, we shouldn't have to deal with that level of comparison constantly. So no wonder self-esteem is at an all-time low. No wonder people are suicidal. No wonder people are angry and stressed and trying to find a place to fit in a world where it feels like there's no space. Like, I mean, I'm like 22 and I feel like there's no space for me. And I have done things for myself. Like, I've made things for myself and I'm really proud of myself for that. But I can only imagine what it feels like to, you know, a 12, 13-year-old girl who is growing up in poverty, who can't afford the things that she wants when her friends have nice things, and, you know, wants this life for herself and has no idea. Like, I've been given such a fucking head start, and even I don't know where to begin. So I can only imagine people with less privilege than me, how they feel. So, you know, the next time someone's mean to you, I think you need to think about it in the sense of, like, I know this sounds so cliche, but, like, what are they going through and what do I have? Because quite often, meanness comes from a sense of insecurity. It comes from, like, they have something that I want, or, you know, they have a skill that I want, and it's shining a mirror to the things that I don't have. Like, the amount of times that I've been jealous of people that have something that I want and I tried to tear them down for it, and you don't even realize you're doing it until after. Like, you know, it's hard for these people to fit or to, like, try and find a way to fit, and quite often that comes out in aggression. And there's literally no way for me to comprehend this other than my own experience, and the experience of other girls that I know that have a similar mindset to me. But I hope that this has brought some kind of solace, that it's okay. Like, you know, we're all mean sometimes by accident. It's very rarely intentional, and it's very rarely personal. It's personal to the person, but a lot of people will take things personally when they really don't need to, you know. And I think it's so hard to choose to do better, but if you can, you should. And if you have the ability to, you really, really should, because it really does change the trajectory of your life. Like, the way I see things now, I see things in such a more positive light. And I'm so grateful that I don't live in a war-stricken country. I don't live in a country where I don't have rights. I have rights. I have freedom. I'm grateful for those things. And I genuinely believe things would be different if I came from a place where, you know, I didn't have the freedoms that I do. Like, I'm so free to be able to think what I want and feel what I want and choose to go where I want. And, like, this is a privilege that I have. And I don't want to come across as like, ableist or, like, you know, because I know some people don't have this freedom. And, like, I just heard the other day that apparently in Afghanistan now, women aren't even allowed to speak in public. And it makes me think, like, how lucky am I and how fortunate am I to have this ability to use my voice, something that is so sacred to me and probably every other woman in the world. And that right has been taken away from them. So I just want to speak about that for a second and, you know, like I don't know, tell people if they didn't know that is going on. And I'm sorry that I've waited until 45 minutes into this podcast to discuss something as serious as that, because that holds significantly more weight than any podcast I've ever put out. That is so important. And the fact that right has been taken away from them is so damaging. And I know there's nothing I can do apart from speak on it and raise awareness on it. But, you know, it makes me think, like, we have this choice. Like, we should do what we can with the choices that we have available to us, instead of just, you know, living in this autopilot mode, because you never know when that choice is going to be taken away from you. And I just feel like we should do what we can with what we have. I'll leave it at that, because this has been a really long podcast. And it's now 4:44, which is really nice. Thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate it. I love you guys. I'll speak to you soon.